It had been locked away for years, that truth I swore would never be spoken, the kind of truth that feels heavy even when no one else knows it, the kind that shapes the way a person looks in the mirror and silently decides what they are worthy of. Carrying it had become second nature, like a shadow that followed even into the brightest rooms, smiling on the outside, laughing when expected, but always feeling a quiet tremor deep inside, wondering if anyone would still look at me the same if they really knew. The night it came out wasn't planned. There wasn't a script. There was only the sound of his breathing close to mine, the kind of closeness that makes walls tremble. His eyes didn't demand anything, but they gave permission for everything. I felt safe in a way I didn't know safety could feel, soft, unspoken, and patient. His touch wasn't demanding, it was steady, like a hand that could hold more than just skin. It felt like a hand that could hold the weight of a truth. The words came out before I even had the courage to rehearse them. My voice shook, uneven, carrying all the years of fear. I confessed the thing I had built my armor around, the thing I had convinced myself would make anyone walk away if they ever discovered it. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would crack open my chest. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Silence followed, and in that silence I braced myself for distance, for disappointment, for the sudden coldness of rejection. But instead he leaned closer, not away, closer. His arms tightened, pulling me into a warmth I didn't think I deserved. His lips brushed against my forehead, and he whispered the kind of words that break chains. "You're safe with me." My tears fell before I could stop them, spilling everything I had kept hidden behind smiles and strength. And he didn't flinch. He didn't recoil. He held me as if the secret only made me more real, more human, more worthy. That moment stripped away everything false between us. It was naked honesty, more intimate than any kiss, more vulnerable than any touch. For the first time, I wasn't performing love, I was receiving it. Raw, imperfect, trembling love. His eyes didn't see shame, they saw me, the kind of seeing that goes deeper than flesh, deeper than beauty, deeper than time. What followed was not hurried, it was slow, like the unraveling of a knot that had been tightened for far too long. His hands traced the scars I had once hidden, not as flaws, but as truths, as stories my body carried. Every touch was a reassurance that nothing was too heavy, nothing was too broken, nothing was too dark to push him away. Desire, instead of dimming under the weight of my confession, grew brighter, fiercer. It wasn't just passion, it was acceptance wrapped in fire. Each kiss burned with the knowledge that nothing was being held back anymore. Every sigh was a release of years of silence. It felt like stepping into a place where shame had no power, where fear dissolved under the heat of being wanted, fully, without conditions. And in his arms, intimacy wasn't just about skin meeting skin. It was about soul meeting soul in the most vulnerable, unguarded way. There's a freedom that comes when the deepest secret is no longer hidden. It's the freedom of being known and still being chosen. That night carved a new truth inside me. That love, real love, doesn't flinch when faced with imperfection. It leans in, it listens, it holds tighter, and in that holding, it makes even the most fragile heart believe again. I learned that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the doorway to the kind of intimacy that changes everything. To share what I feared most, and to be met not with rejection, but with tenderness, was the most powerful moment of my life. And as his hands intertwined with mine, steady and sure, I knew the secret no longer owned me. Love did. When the secret was finally spoken, I expected everything to change. A part of me believed desire would vanish the moment the truth was out, that what had just bloomed between us would wither under the weight of my confession. I thought his touch would hesitate, his eyes would look differently, his closeness would pull back. Instead, something else happened, something I never imagined. He didn't retreat, he didn't falter. His lips touched mine with a hunger that felt deeper than before, a hunger that wasn't just for my body, but for all of me, even the parts I had feared revealing. Every kiss after that was charged with something I didn't have a name for at first, something fierce, unashamed, and consuming. It was as if he had been waiting for me to step fully into the light, and when I finally did, his passion ignited like fire catching wind. My body trembled, not from fear anymore, but from a release I hadn't known was possible. To be seen completely and still desired, that was a kind of freedom I had never touched before. His hands no longer moved carefully, as though afraid of breaking something fragile. They claimed me boldly, with reverence and fire. His touch was not hesitant but certain, not questioning but answering, telling me in every motion that I was wanted more now than ever. Desire grew with every breath, every brush of his lips along my skin. What I once thought would push him away only seemed to pull him closer, and in that closeness I felt a power rising in me, a power born not from hiding but from being unmasked. Every scar, every flaw, every truth I once believed would steal away passion now became part of the intensity that burned between us. His eyes held me with a heat that left no space for doubt. There was no hesitation, no pause of reconsideration. Only fire. When his hands slid along me, I felt more alive than I had in years, as though my body was learning to breathe all over again. Each kiss grew heavier, deeper, like the more I revealed, the more he craved. And for the first time, I wasn't ashamed of that craving. I surrendered to it, letting it consume me, letting the weight of desire break down the last walls I had built around myself. It wasn't just lust, it was the kind of passion that made the soul ache, that turned every touch into a vow. The air between us was electric, alive with the thrill of knowing there was nothing left to hide. He kissed me like he was erasing years of silence, like he was proving that nothing I carried could ever make me less in his eyes. And with each kiss, the shame that had once haunted me began to dissolve. What amazed me most was how natural it felt, how effortless the connection became once all the fear was gone. Desire flowed freely, like a river finally unblocked, surging stronger because it was no longer restrained. I felt his hunger and my own blend together, a dance of fire that needed no words. Every movement, every sigh, every desperate pull of his hands against my body told me louder than words ever could. I was wanted, fully, completely, unconditionally. I had always believed passion needed perfection to survive, that flaws and truths would ruin the illusion of desire. But in his arms, desire wasn't fragile, it was unbreakable. It burned brighter precisely because nothing was hidden. There was no pretending, no performing, no fear, only raw, unashamed closeness. His breath against my ear, his hands pulling me closer, his lips exploring with an urgency that left me undone. It was everything I had once thought I would never experience again. The deeper the fire burned, the more I realized it wasn't only about physical hunger. It was about being chosen after being seen. It was about knowing that even the parts of me I had once buried couldn't keep him from wanting me. That knowledge turned every kiss into a spark, every embrace into an inferno. Desire became a celebration, not a secret. It was a declaration in every touch, a truth spoken through the language of passion. What I thought would destroy closeness had only made it stronger. What I thought would bring distance had instead drawn us into a heat so consuming it felt eternal. And as the fire between us raged, shame no longer had a voice. Only love did. There was a shift I could feel in my very bones the moment my truth was met not with judgment, but with love. Something inside me broke open, something that had been locked away for so long I had forgotten it was even there. I realized then that intimacy wasn't about hiding the cracks and pretending to be whole. It was about letting someone trace those cracks with their fingertips and still wanting to stay. When his eyes held mine after my confession, there was no recoil, no hesitation, only a depth I had never seen before. That look alone gave me a freedom I had never tasted, the freedom to breathe without fear, the freedom to let go of all the masks and armor I had worn for years. In that freedom, desire became something entirely new. It wasn't just the rush of skin against skin or the thrill of hunger. It was a surrender, a letting go, a merging of everything I was with everything he offered. The first time we touched after that moment, it felt different. His hands weren't just exploring, they were cherishing, claiming, and revering all at once. Every brush of his fingertips carried an unspoken promise that he wanted all of me, not just the polished surface, but the raw truth underneath. I melted into that touch, not because it was gentle or fiery, but because it was real. It carried weight, as if each movement was a vow to hold what I had given him, my story, my secret, my scars, without ever letting them push him away. When his lips found mine, the kiss was no longer just about passion. It was about surrendering every guarded piece of myself into the safety of his mouth, his breath, his hunger. It was a kiss that consumed and gave back all at once, a kiss that turned the air electric and heavy with unspoken words. In that closeness, I felt my heart and body intertwine, as though they could no longer exist apart. As we moved together, there was no rush, no desperate need to prove anything. Instead, there was a rhythm born from trust, a rhythm that made every sigh feel sacred. My body responded with a fire I hadn't felt in years, but underneath that fire was a deep current of emotion that made every movement ache with meaning. It wasn't just sex, it wasn't just desire, it was a merging of soul and body, of love and heat, of vulnerability and strength. Every time he touched me, I could feel his acceptance pressed into my skin. It wasn't the kind of intimacy that demanded, it was the kind that gave, the kind that allowed me to unfold layer by layer until nothing was hidden anymore. And when nothing was hidden, when everything was laid bare, that's when the fire burned the brightest. Every kiss was hotter, every embrace tighter, every sound more desperate because it came from a place of truth. The passion was unrestrained, but it was never empty. It was wild and consuming, yet anchored in the knowledge that this was more than just physical closeness. It was the kind of connection that made my chest ache and my eyes blur with tears, even as my body trembled from the intensity of his touch. I could feel myself letting go completely, not just into the heat of the moment, but into him, into his arms, his breath, his soul. When he whispered my name against my skin, it wasn't just desire, it was devotion. His voice trembled with the same mixture of hunger and tenderness that had taken root in my own chest. Every movement, every caress felt like the sealing of a vow, that nothing I had revealed could ever lessen the way he wanted me, the way he loved me. That truth made every second blaze brighter, every kiss linger longer, every touch drive deeper into the core of me. I had known passion before, but never like this. This wasn't about escape or thrill. It was about arrival. It was about finding a place where body and soul no longer fought each other, where both could collapse into the same fire and rise together. It was about giving all of myself, every flaw, every fear, every longing, and finding that what came back to me was even more than I had given. When we finally lay there, our breaths tangled, our bodies spent, I felt an ache in my chest stronger than the ache in my skin. It was the ache of being truly known and still being wanted, the ache of realizing that love doesn't just survive truth, it burns brighter because of it, and in that moment I understood that this was more than passion. This was the fusion of soul and body, unrestrained, unashamed, and eternal. There was always a part of me that lived in fear, fear of being too much or not enough, fear of being left the moment the truth came out, fear that love was fragile and conditional. That fear shaped the way I loved, carefully, cautiously, always holding something back. For years I thought that was the only way to keep closeness alive, Show only the best, hide the rest, and maybe no one would see the cracks. But love like that is never steady. It's like standing on glass, waiting for the wrong step to break everything. When I finally opened myself fully, when the words I never thought I could say came spilling out, I was certain that would be the end. It felt like throwing the most fragile piece of myself into fire, bracing to watch it burn, but the fire didn't destroy it. It transformed it. Instead of walking away, he stayed. Instead of pulling back, he drew me closer. That moment changed everything. There was no perfection left to hide behind, no illusion of flawlessness to maintain. I had shown the truth, and the truth was still loved. That was when the fear began to lose its grip. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of acceptance, not shallow words, not passing comfort, but the kind of acceptance that looks you in the eye after seeing everything and still whispers, "I want you." From that moment forward, every kiss carried more than passion, it carried trust. Every embrace was tighter, as though he was anchoring me in a place I thought I would never belong. His voice, low and steady against my skin, held a kind of promise I had never heard before, that love doesn't need perfection to survive, only truth. The bond between us grew stronger because there was no more pretending, no more fear of being discovered. He already knew, and he chose to stay. I began to breathe differently, not shallow breaths laced with doubt, but deep, steady ones filled with certainty. Lying beside him, hearing his heart beat against mine, I realized that love beyond fear is not a fragile thing. It's unshakable. It's built on a foundation that cannot be broken by secrets because there are no secrets left. That kind of love makes every moment feel fuller, richer, deeper. Even the smallest touches carried meaning. His hand brushing mine wasn't just skin against skin. It was reassurance, a reminder that I was safe. His lips against my cheek felt like a vow, spoken without words, that I would never again have to shrink myself to be loved. And when he held me, when his arms wrapped around me with a strength that felt both protective and tender, I knew what it meant to belong completely. The nights we spent together became more than passion. They became communion, a merging of breath, of heartbeat, of soul. Every whispered word carried weight. Every sigh carried release. Every silence was filled with knowing. I no longer worried about what he would see if he looked too closely. I wanted him to look, to see, to know, because love without fear no longer hides, and the more I surrendered, the stronger the bond grew. It wasn't about never fighting, never hurting, never struggling. It was about knowing that nothing we faced would shake the foundation we had built. Because when you've already revealed the deepest truth and been embraced instead of abandoned, everything else feels small. I had lived so much of my life believing love was fragile, that it could only last if I maintained a mask, but the opposite was true. Real love was never about perfection. It was about imperfection embraced, truth revealed, vulnerability welcomed. That was what made it powerful. That was what made it last. I remember one night, lying tangled in his arms, the room quiet except for our breathing. He kissed my shoulder, so softly I almost thought I had imagined it, and whispered, "I've never wanted anything more than this." The words struck me deeply, not because they were grand, but because they were simple and true. In that moment, I understood. To be fully known and still deeply wanted is the greatest gift love can give. And from then on, I loved without fear. I loved with abandon, with honesty, with every part of myself laid bare, because I had finally learned that true love doesn't ask for masks, it asks for truth. And when it receives truth and answers it with acceptance, the bond becomes unshakable. That is when love becomes everything. If this story touched your heart, if it stirred something inside you, then stay with us. Like this video, share it with someone who believes in love beyond fear, and subscribe to join a community where vulnerability is celebrated, passion is embraced, and every story reminds us that true love is not about perfection. It's about being fully seen, fully known, and still deeply wanted. Until the next story, keep love alive, keep it honest, and never be afraid to let your heart be heard.